Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be covering the iPad, I'm going to be covering the Remarkable 2 tablet, I'm going to be talking about the Kindle, and I'm also going to be talking about my Wacom tablet. Sorry, it's in the other place that I live. I spend a lot of time reading and writing and also doing a few creative things. I am making this video for someone who is considering purchase any one of these devices, just to give a comparison and illustrate what the differences are between them. And I want this video to be as useful as possible, so I'm going to try to pack in as much detail as possible. I'd like to start off with the functions. By far the most versatile in terms of actual function is going to be the iPad. Not only can you write in apps like Notability, for example, which is, by the way, a very, very nice handwriting app, but you can also do things like browse YouTube, go on the internet, take pictures, etc, etc, etc. So the iPad obviously is a really versatile device, and I tend to use the iPad plus the Apple Pencil. This is the iPad Pro, and more recently I've been trying to learn how to draw anime type style stuff, and so this is like my anime character. This is the VTuber version of Dabido, complete with hair. So the Kindle is a device that you might choose to get. It fits really nicely in the hand, and so it's really, really useful for when you're chilling in bed. You may not necessarily want to hold up a big iPad. The Kindle is one of those devices where you can literally hold it with one hand quite comfortably and take it along with you anywhere, and I personally like the feel of it. In this particular case, I've got the Kindle Oasis, which is a really light, it's got like a slightly bigger screen. I think I spend a bit more on it compared to the usual Kindle Paperwhite, but for me, because I do so much reading, that was very well worth it. It's kind of replaced books for me quite a bit, because I find that it's actually cheaper to buy books on the Kindle store than it is to physically purchase a book. Now, there are some books that I like to read because, you know, I want to get that certain feeling. So for example, I have like a copy of Principles by Ray Dalio, and that's a book that I really wanted to purchase a hard copy for, because part of that is like a bit of sentimentality, and just the idea that you're flicking through the pages somehow carries more weight. But there are some books, like I want to read them. I don't mind just grabbing the ideas from the book itself, as opposed to trying to go to that extreme of like, oh, like I really want the sort of sensation of reading a book there. So I use the Kindle mostly for that aspect of things. Now, the Remarkable 2, which may be something that not everyone has heard about, it's this kind of newish tablet. Basically, this tablet is kind of like a giant version of the Kindle. The tablet is an e-ink screen, which is very much like the Kindle. I've actually covered this in another review, but fundamentally, if you just want something that looks like a giant Kindle, the Remarkable 2 tablet is a good one for that. In terms of like reading on the devices, reading on an iPad is fine. Like, you know, reading on an iPad is quite nice. It's kind of the same as if you were looking at a computer screen. But the reason that I use Kindle and Remarkable for most of my reading is because it has e-ink. It's not like a light shining directly in your eyes, but rather it's like a physical process that happens on the screen. The black ink is displayed on the screen, which is called e-ink. And so what happens is that sort of better reflects light, and it's supposed to be easier on the eyes theoretically. And I find that that's true in daily life. You know, the Kindle and the Remarkable 2 both have really nice screens to look at. I find that if I look at my iPad all day, my eyes get quite strained. In terms of the contents of what you can read, this is something that's also really important. On an iPad, obviously you can read articles, things on the Kindle store even, and you can read things on the Apple bookstore. You can also read PDF files, basically anything that can be accessed on the internet, you can probably read on an iPad. The same cannot be said for the Kindle and the Remarkable 2, unfortunately. The Remarkable 2 does not have an internet browser, which is really unfortunate, because I think that would actually make it a much more versatile device. You can set up little shortcuts on your iPhone or iPad that actually send an article, for example, to the Remarkable 2 tablet, but it's a little bit finicky. The other thing is you can sync to your Remarkable 2 tablet via a cable and their special Remarkable 2 app from the computer. But that kind of thing is kind of just like a lot of friction, so I really tend not to like doing that. Similarly, the Kindle has I think like an internet browser, but it's pretty bad, so you don't really go to Kindle to browse the internet. Not a lot of people know this, but you can actually send PDF files to the Kindle. Like, Amazon gives you an email address that you can send PDF files to, and what it will do is it'll actually convert those PDF files into a Kindle readable document, which is really cool. Now I want to talk about writing. Not only with this new iPad, with the Apple Pencil 2, which is actually really nice. So this is the iPad Pro, and writing on it is very smooth and very nice. It's very, very responsive. And the only maybe little gripe I have is sometimes it can feel a little bit on the slippy side, especially compared to something like the Remarkable 2 tablet or even a Wacom tablet, where the writing actually feels like paper. The writing on the iPad does feel a little bit like you're writing in glass at times. Sometimes it becomes a bit pleasurable in a sense, because it feels like you're writing very smoothly, but understandably, some people may not like that. Remarkable 2's writing is much more like paper, so if you just listen to the sound, like, it feels as it sounds. It's very hard to describe the feeling, but basically it feels almost like you're running paper. Not quite, but close enough that if the experience is quite the same. The pencil for the Remarkable 2 tablet is actually really nice to hold. It's got this really nice sort of slightly roughish texture, just nice enough that it feels really nice in the hand and you can actually write with it quite a while. When you're writing on the Remarkable 2, you're sort of got these Remarkable 2 files, and those files don't necessarily automatically sync to anything, which is really sad. If the Remarkable 2 automatically synced to Dropbox or something like that, I think that would make the Remarkable 2 much more compelling. You just can't write on a Kindle. They do have like a little keyboard that you can type, but it's really slow and bad. Like, let me show you. You got this little QWERTY IUOP keyboard, and you can see, like, if I press a button, it's alright. Like, it's not unresponsive, but if you're actually typing as fast as you might, like you're texting your friend, it's not going to register all the letters, unfortunately. Yeah, taking notes on Kindle is a pain, but there is one good thing about Kindle and taking notes, which is that when you actually highlight something on Kindle, you can use an application called Readwise, which is a web app, and you can actually sync the Kindle highlights with something like Notion, which is amazing. Now I've got all my Kindle highlights actually highlighted in Notion, so that's really cool. The Wacom tablet is a completely different device. You can write with it if you really wanted to, but the main application, of course, if you know what a Wacom is that you're actually using it for art. It has, thousands of layers of pressure sensitivity. The feel of that is actually the nicest out of every single thing you can use. So compared to the iPad, compared to the Remarkable, the Wacom tablet is like by far the nicest. The problem with the Wacom obviously is that it's not a screen, and you don't know this until you actually start trying it, but it takes quite a bit of hand-eye coordination. You have to sort of figure out how to orientate your pen and pen drawings in space, and that can take a bit of use to. Like doing something like drawing a perfect circle, which is, by the way, already really hard. Doing something like that on a Wacom tablet is actually like the next step harder. There's heaps and heaps and heaps of artists that use the Wacom tablets and find that that's their main go-to thing, but it does take a bit of getting used to. I've got the Intuos Pro, and that just feels super nice to write on. The nibs do wear out, similar with the Remarkable ones actually, but you get supplied a bunch at the start. But with the Wacom, they can wear out reasonably quickly. The iPad can also be used for art, and in fact, that's what I'm using it for at the moment. The iPad is actually a comparatively cheap device for art compared to, say, the Wacom Cintiq, which is this gigantic thing. The iPad certainly gives you that screen and allows you to have that fine control of the way you can draw. And it also has some level of pressures of sensitivities. I use Clip Studio Paint personally, which is like the one that they use for manga and anime art. The Remarkable 2 is pretty good for sketching, but sometimes has this problem where, especially the edges, it doesn't quite get the detection of where the pen is supposed to be marking. It's great for handwriting, but honestly, I don't think it's the best for art pieces. Obviously, you can't do any color on the Remarkable 2 tablet either, so that's another big deficit compared to the iPad or even compared to the Wacom plus computer combination. So yeah, that's writing and drawing in a nutshell. So the fifth thing I want to talk about is syncing. The iPad can sync to anything, whether that's Dropbox, Box, Google Docs, whatever, Ox, anything. The Remarkable 2, as I mentioned before, PDF files can sync to it, and you can actually share web articles to it via an iPhone, but it's just like a pain, and sometimes it takes a while to load, and it's just a bit of cognitive friction. So the syncing is not the best there. The Kindle, in terms of syncing, you can use the Kindle store, and that's a pretty good way. That Kindle store also goes to your Apple devices, which is pretty good. And finally, you can send PDF files to the actual Kindle itself, so that's really nice. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the battery. So the battery life for an iPad Air, for example, is typically about 10 hours. So, might get about a day or two's worth depending on how much you're working on it, and also depending on the intensity of the apps that you're working on. The Kindle has like this crazy battery life. I literally charge my Kindle probably once a month. It's got about 40 hours of battery life, depending on which one you get. And the Remarkable 2 has about 14 hours of battery life, which is actually also really good. If you're using your Remarkable for an hour each day, then it's going going to last for 2 weeks. And I found that to be pretty true. So it lasts a long time. The Wacom tablet, depends on which Wacom tablet you get, obviously. I won't talk about the battery life too much there because there's too much variation. What I think you should buy. So students, I think that the iPad is the best. And the reason that I say that is just you have the ability to do so much stuff on the iPad that you just can't do on the other devices. I find that if you just had to buy one device, then it would be the iPad, hands down. The Remarkable 2 tablet, the reason that you would buy this is that you might be one of those people that really cares about mindfulness and not being distracted. And I think that the Remarkable 2 does this really well because there's literally nothing else you can do on it. Then that's a pretty good option actually. For example, if you find that you just want to get away from your iPad or get away from the digital world, but you still want to read and write, then the Remarkable 2 tablet is actually very well justified. Just realize that it takes extra effort to get notes onto the Remarkable 2 tablet and then extra effort to take notes off of the Remarkable 2 tablet. With the Kindle, it's something where it's much more discreet, it's much lighter to carry, of course, and you can bring it around, and it's also distractionless as well. It's the one that you would take, you're lying in the bathtub and you want to read. So I think if I was to compare Kindle and an iPad, then if I had the choice, I would read absolutely everything I could on the Kindle. Lastly, for the artist, it would be the Wacom tablet, like hands down. But the iPad is a close second. It has enough pressure sensitivity and accuracy that you can legitimately use it for many types of art that you do. If you have the patience to do hand-eye coordination and you actually like the feeling, then use a Wacom tablet. Alrighty, that's my ultimate tablet comparison. Let me know in the comments if you decide to get a tablet based on this video, and I will see you in the next one. See ya!